Hey everyone, Zach from the barbellphysio.com, and today we're talking about my 4 favorite Jefferson curl variations. The Jefferson curl is a controversial exercise with a lot of people believing that this lightly loaded spinal flexion exercise is dangerous, but in fact it's quite the opposite. It's a great way to open up some individuals that have a stiff low back or need to start tolerating a little bit of loading when they're not in a perfectly neutral position, and so that's why I utilize it, and I'm going to talk you through 4 different variations and when I use each of those from both a performance standpoint as well as a physical therapy standpoint. So we're gonna first start with the standard Jefferson curl, where I'm gonna stand on the edge of a box here, and I'm just gonna work on slowly rounding my spine down, letting that weight pull me down and get a really big stretch in my posterior chain and my low back before I then come back up. So what we're really thinking of here is moving from the top down and trying to control this. While it's not exactly possible to do this, I'm trying to imagine moving from like one little piece of my back at a time and just unraveling everything down, then pulling it all the way back up. That's your standard Jefferson curl. That's where I think a lot of people need a lot of movement control in that to be able to perform that. So some of these other variations are a little easier to begin with than the standard Jefferson curl, which is great for opening up some spine flexion and loading spine flexion just a little bit. So the next 2 exercises are gonna be a bit of a step down from that help people understand where we want to go a little bit better, and then I tend to progress towards the Jefferson curl. So the first variation that's kind of a step down is the reverse Jefferson. So we start with the weight on the ground, we drop down into the bottom of a squat, and I think of getting my back as rounded as possible from the start. I'm then gonna hold the weight and push my hips up towards the sky. And as I push my hips up, I'm gonna exhale all of my air. I'm gonna try to get my legs as straight as they can go. And I'm gonna try to not even really lift the weight off the ground. Once I fully exhale and fully open up my legs, we're going to go back down. So it's just that simple back and forth. Exhale as the butt comes down. Should be exhale as the butt goes up. Inhale as the butt goes down. And so now with that, we're basically utilizing the arms being locked in place, the hamstrings getting stretched to create that little flexion stretch in the back. So it makes it a little easier for people that can't quite figure out how to move just a little bit at a time. You'll find a lot of people that as soon as they Jefferson curl, because they've spent their entire life trying to hinge with a flat back, they have a really hard time making that happen, and either everything goes at once or everything stays completely locked down. So that's where the reverse Jefferson comes in. The next variation, we typically utilize either the upright of a squat rack or a wall. And again, this helps people that just don't quite have that control for that first Jefferson curl variation, but we get legs a little in front of the wall. We're gonna kind of tuck our tailbone underneath our hips so that we get our back flat on the wall. And then we can simply think of peeling our spine off the wall. So this just slows that Jefferson curl down. You can do that holding a weight, but you're just thinking of putting one little piece of your back on or off the wall or rack at a time, so you have that little bit of a tactile feedback. Now there's also a little twist to this one that you could do for individuals that are really stiff lower thoracic spine or at the thoracolumbar junction where your low back and upper back meet. You can do that same motion, but when you get down here to where just your butt's on the wall, you do a little rotation side to side, and man, that really works that thoracolumbar junction, lower thoracic spine, which can often be a difficult area to get into. The final variation I like is actually a band-resisted Jefferson curl. So when I utilize this, it's typically my patients that are flexion intolerant, so flexion-based movements irritate their back pain. We work through some cat-cow stuff or some lightly loaded, not really against gravity flexion variations, and that feels good and gets them moving a little bit better, but I need to take that up to standing. But when they go standing, things just get a little tighter as the body kind of instinctively tries to protect them a little bit. So what we're gonna do is instead use the band to resist it. That's gonna really get all of our core muscles activated, and a lot of times I find this just makes it a little bit easier to progress to some standing flexion variations. So you notice that my bands are a little wider than shoulder width, so my hands are right outside of my thigh, and I'm simply gonna think of rounding a little bit of my spine at a time as I press this down all the way to the ground or as far down as I can go. And then unravel back up. So you got 4 different variations there, all the way from the standard Jefferson curl to reverse Jefferson curl, where we have the weight down on the ground, to band-resisted Jefferson curl. So a lot of different variations for you to work on opening up a little spinal flexion, a little posterior chain overall mobility, and then to start lightly loading the back when you get out of position, because that happens in life and we need to be prepared for that with some light loading there.